I'm referring to a quote from a book by that guy, Fukuoka, Masanobu Fukuoka, and he wrote a book called Do Nothing Farming, and he was actually a very hard worker. It's not that he was doing nothing, it's that he's trying to get out of the way of how nature actually works and avoid messing things up before he even gets started. So our mantra in regenerative farming is first do nothing, okay? Hey, so humans are really good at problem solving. So like if we see a problem like, I have a flat tire, and we say, man, I really don't want my tire to be flat, and so there's a problem, and then we say, I better fix my flat tire. Solution, right? Problem, solution. But where we get into trouble is complex topics and complex systems, and it seems to be our worst trait sometimes when I'm thinking about this. I just put the gun control debate up here just because it's one that everybody's talking about right now. It's a complicated issue, and we don't know on either side exactly what the best answer is. It seems clear that there's something that needs to be done, and then nothing gets done. And we go around and around and around on the topic instead of actually solving any of the problems. It's like an issue that people have. But I'm not going to talk about that tonight because I'm not an expert on that. What I am going to talk about is regenerative farming. So I own a company, a partial owner in a company called Good Oak LLC, and we do regenerative agriculture, land management, restoration. And basically, if you don't know what regenerative agriculture is, it's a way of growing food and animals that doesn't destroy the planet and make everybody sick and terrible. Okay, it's really good. So what we do is we mimic natural ecosystems. And my business partner and I created an agroforestry method, and our main goal is to plant savanna mimics on tilled ground. And we do that using bees, trees, and animals. I put grazing animals because bees are animals, but our marketing guy says bees, trees, and animals sounds good. But it always bothers me. And these are pictures not of just random bees and trees and animals. These are trees and bees and animals that I actually interact with. That's me, holding bees that have honey, and those are our pigs. And that's 3 giant white oaks that are on the property of Mark Shepard up in Viola, Wisconsin. Those trees are there because while they were clear cutting that area, they were too small to be cut, because they just missed the window. And now they're these giants, right? They're the only trees like them in the entire area. That's a human standing right there. So anyway, trees are cool. So I stole the phrase Naïve intervention from Nassim Taleb. He wrote a book called Anti-Fragile, which is really fantastic. And if you have the time and you can put up with that kind of thing, I would suggest reading it. The idea basically is that we see a problem and we try and solve it, and the solution creates more problems, especially on the long term. We have a real hard time with long-term thinking, and especially in complex systems. And Nassim actually was like a stock market guy. And he wrote a lot of his stuff based off of how to make money off of the complexities of the stock market, but it applies so beautifully to the ideas of evolution, ecology, and regenerative farming that he's just a hero of mine because of it. So that's what this is based off of. So what I'm going to do is go through bees, trees, and livestock. I'm going to give you 3 examples of problems and naive interventions, and then at the end I'm going to regale you with the answers that are not naive, they're wise interventions, what you might say, how we could actually solve some of the issues that we have with these systems by using their natural tendencies. Okay, so the first one is trees. So what I'm going to do is set this up for you. So fruit trees, you may not know this, almost all the fruit that you eat at the grocery store is grafted. And what I mean by that is there is a rootstock, which my laser were working, I think. There we go. That's the rootstock. So that is a tree that has good roots for growing in the area where you're growing. And then you have a graft stock or a scion, which is the top, okay? And what we do is we find a tree that has really good fruit, or we breed a tree that has really good fruit. It's perfect, and we want that fruit, like a pink lady apple or whatever the apple is that you love at the grocery store. And because apples are genetically variable, if we were just to breed new apples, we would get apples that aren't the same as the pink lady apple. We want the pink lady apple. We want it to be exactly like that. We want it to taste the same way every single time, and we want to be able to market it with a name, right? So what we do is we cut a chunk off that pink lady apple, and then we cut the top off this tree, and we stick them together. It's a graft, okay? And when you buy a fruit tree at Home Depot, look at the bottom, it has a little graft scar. If you buy a tree from Stark Brothers Nursery, whatever, most of them are grafted, okay? Now what that does though, because we're cloning those trees, it freezes them in evolutionary time. So a lot of our favorite apple varietals are 250 years old or more, right? And for 250 years they've gone through no evolution, no natural selection. But their pests have kept evolving. And in fact, their pests have evolved at an accelerated rate. And so the upshot is now you can't grow most fruit trees, unless you're super lucky, without having sprays, herbicides, watering, fertilizer, all kinds of interventions, right? Now that sounds weird, right, to some of you. You might be thinking, well, of course you have to spray trees, of course you have to fertilize them, of course you have to control weeds around them. How else would they produce fruit, right? That's just how we think, okay? But here's a case. Oh, well, so here's the spray, sorry. Like I said, I made this talk up today, so. So here's your fruit that you get at the grocery store being sprayed with chemicals to control pests, okay? And here you see a strip of dead vegetation. That's herbicide that's controlling all the weeds that might grow around the base of the tree. And that black line there is a watering system, okay? So this tree has to be watered, sprayed, fertilized, and controlled in a bunch of different ways in order for it to produce any fruit at all. And if you've ever planted a peach tree in your yard in Kansas, you're probably going, oh yeah, I can't grow peach trees. I don't know why I can't get peaches off them. Or every once in a while you do, okay? So, interesting case in point. Here's a persimmon tree. Raise your hand if you know what a persimmon tree is. You seen one? Okay. Persimmon trees are native to Kansas and Missouri, so you've probably seen them even if you didn't know you've seen them. Every year, the persimmon trees that grow out in our woods here are covered in delicious fruit, highly nutritious. No one planted them, no one fertilizes them, no one prunes them, no one controls weeds around them, no one protects them from deer, and yet they produce hundreds of pounds of delicious, healthful fruit that feeds humans and animals and wildlife, right? How is that possible? Right? No, who fertilizes that tree? Who prunes it? Who controls it? Who saves it from all of its predators and pests, right? So this is our first discussion of intervention. We'll come back and talk about the answer in just a second, okay? But think about it. It's a weird question, right? Earlier somebody said, oh, we're the wheat state. It's the most important part of our diet, and it's whatever. Wheat is destroying our planet right now. Like we're tilling the soil and we're eroding away the soil in North America to grow wheat. And it's not really even digestible for people unless we grind it up and do all these crazy things with it. But that tree right there just grows in the woods and makes food for people. Okay. Bees. So you see the guy right there fogging the beehive? All the honey that you buy at the grocery store, if it's not regenerative or organic, is getting sprayed with things for mites, and it's getting treated with antibiotics for viruses and bacteria. Actually, a lot of it now is being shipped in from other countries like China because we can't produce enough of it in the United States. Bees are fed gallons and gallons of sugar water, cane sugar, basically, to keep them alive and help them produce more honey, but it's really made from sugar water. And one of the biggest pests that they deal with is the varroa mite. You see these red mites here? Varroa destructor is the scientific name. It's pretty cool. So varroa mites decimate bee populations, and the combination of that and all the sprays that we put on all of our trees, like the apple trees that we just looked at, is killing bees. And colony collapse right now is like terrible. Like bees are dying all over the United States to the point where we have to import honey from other countries. And a lot of times that honey is adulterated, like it's being mixed with corn syrup and stuff like that. So we do all this crazy stuff, and yet the bees are still dying, right? Okay, that's the second one. Come back to it. Oh, but yeah, so the counterpoint to that, like a persimmon tree, is bees have been on the planet for 120 million years. That's 120 million more years than we have been on the planet, right? They managed to survive by themselves with no problem. This is a wild bee colony that someone took a picture of in Italy. No one takes care of it, no one sprays it with mites, no one puts any chemicals on it, and yet they're thriving. And there's wild bee colonies all over the place, right? So they managed to make honey on their own without anybody giving them sugar water or being sprayed, right? Yeah. This is interesting at all. I'm not losing you guys. Where's he going at this? This is thrilling. I've never heard of anything like this before. Okay, livestock. Remember I said beech trees and animals. That's what we do. So livestock. In order to get high yields and to make care for them easy, We put cattle in pens, you know. We put them in fenced areas, and then they continually graze, and they eat. What they do is they eat their favorite things first. Yes, cows have favorite foods, so they'll say, ooh, I love cut plant and clover, and they'll keep eating that until it's all gone. And then they'll eat their second favorite thing all the way down to their 100th favorite thing, until all that's left is barren plain like this with poisonous plants that they can't eat like Natura, right? That's continuous grazing. This is why cattle are bad for the environment, quote unquote, right? It's because they destroy ecosystems, right? Or we take cattle and we put them in confinement operations, and instead of feeding them the grass that they're supposed to eat, we feed them corn that we destroy the soil to make and spray with herbicides, and we make them sick and we make ourselves sick by eating them. And the same thing with hogs. We put these beautiful, intelligent animals that live in groups, that love each other, and eat thousands of different types of plants and animals in the wild, and we put them in 4x8 cages that are just about the same size as them, all because we want to be efficient and profitable. And it's a big mess, okay? I'm going to focus on one aspect of that whole terrible system, and that's wormer, okay? If you talk to an expert, like go to a university and say, can I keep sheep or goats without giving them wormer? Can I keep cattle or hogs without giving them wormer? They will say no. Your sheep and goats especially will die if you don't treat the worms that live in their guts, okay? But sheep and goats evolved, actually separated from each other about 7 million years ago. That's 7 million more years than humans have been on the planet. And they were able to survive all that time without any help or any wormers from people. And some of the most amazing livestock that we have and we use in our regenerative systems are feral animals that have been left alone and with nature's help have become self-sufficient. The longhorn cattle is descended from Spanish cattle that were released 500 years ago into South Texas, and it just went wild and did its thing. Natural selection shaped it, and now it can live off of scrubland. It lives off of way less water than other animals. It can raise calves. It can defend itself against coyotes and wolves. And it's basically nature's perfect cow. It created in North America through evolution and humans being done. And all done in the absence of humans, okay? These are, I think they're called Gulf Coast sheep, or Gulf Coast wild sheep. They're sheep that were released on the Gulf Coast of the United States and just went out there and did sheep things. No one gives them wormer, no one chases them around and shears off their wool, and yet they're thriving. And people are catching them now and bringing them into breeding operations because, wow, we need those genetics, right? But those genetics developed in the absence of human intervention. And then these are Kiko goats. Kiko goats were originally dairy goats that were released along the railroad tracks as they built them in New Zealand, so that when the railroad workers came back through, they would have food, because the goats would breed and there'd be herds and they could hunt. The Kiko goat is now the world's awesomest like land clearer / meat goat. It has high disease resistance. It brings, raises kids without any help. They're really amazing, and again, developed in the absence of humans. Okay? You see a pattern developing here? All right, so now I'm going to give you the answers. This talk is not really long. I'm just going to go through it, right? You're going to get the chance to ask a lot of questions. So livestock. So the wormer question. Here's the science that's really interesting. So my biologist or my veterinarian or my extension agent might tell me you have to worm sheep. Why don't wild sheep need wormer? Anybody know? Just raise your hand. Why don't wild sheep need wormer? Something they eat. That's a really good question. Yeah, there are natural alimentics. Yes, so they can eat plants that will actually help knock the worm load down. Good. There's one other way. Does anybody know the biology of the worms? Go ahead.
Well, their genetics are better, right?
Their genetics are better. That's true. They are generally physically more resistant to it. But there's an even more simple reason why. Okay.
They don't eat their own shit.
They don't eat their own shit. That is exactly right. And the way that happens is in a wild situation where sheep are grazing, they're in a herd or a flock in this case, right? Why are they in a flock? It's for self-defense. So there's predators out to get them. It's safety in numbers. When they're flocked up, though, they eat everything in the same area where they are. So what do they have to do? They have to move. They have to keep moving. So they're moving and mowing and mobbing. They're mobbing, moving, and mowing. I can't even say it. So they eat all the grass in one place, and then they move to another place, and they're being chased by wolves and coyotes as they go, right? So when they drop their fecal on the ground, they go away from it. So they have a worm load, but it never reaches plague proportions because they don't constantly reinfect themselves, okay? So what do we do in captivity? What's a naive intervention? We'll give them wormer. Now why is giving them wormer a naive intervention? And this is the interesting part. You're gonna see this answer over and over again. The reason why is we're killing the worms, but we're also putting the worms under selection pressure. And we're taking the sheep out of selection pressure, right? So we're saving the sheep from the worms, and we're putting pressure on the worms. The worms are saying, man, we gotta find a solution for this wormer. So the worms get stronger and the sheep get weaker, right? So if you keep them moving through your pasture, you move them away from the worms. If you select for good genetics and you allow them a highly diverse diet, then they don't need wormer. And the ones that do, let them die. They only die once. And in fact, what we do is, in a good system, I stole that line too. In a good system, we cull. So if we see an animal that's suffering from worms, it's not doing well, we remove that animal and we make it into shepherd's pie. So we're mimicking natural cycles. Breed them when they would breed in the wild. Have their babies in May when it's warm outside, not in the middle of winter in a barn. Don't give them supplemental grains, which makes them flabby and weak and silly. Rotate, move them around in the pasture, okay? So that's naive versus wise intervention. Trees, okay. It's going to be the same answer here, but I think it's interesting how it works in each one. So with the trees, you have parasites. Let's say like, with an apple, that's a baby apple tree that actually sprouted. So the baby apple trees are being attacked by fire blight, for example, which is a fungus, or by moths that lay eggs in the apples, right? So we know that the persimmon tree is able to produce fruit every year, and apples evolved long before people did. I didn't actually look up that statistic, but I know it's true. And they produced apples without our help for a long period of time. How did they do it? They did it through genetic variation. So when we spray the apple tree to kill its parasites, we make the parasites stronger and the apple tree, that's correct. Okay, good job. One of you is a great student. But what's the solution with the trees? And this is a tricky one, and it's really hard. I can't get this across to people. Like there's this group in Kansas City called the Giving Grove. Absolutely love them. They plant orchards. And I asked the CEO of the Giving Grove if they would plant just one, open pollinated apple tree in each Giving Grove. And they said, we don't have space. Okay. But the solution for pests is to allow the tree to evolve along with the pests. Stop putting pressure on the pests, put the pressure back on the tree so that the tree can become stronger. The only way for us to do that effectively is to grow thousands and thousands of baby trees from seed that are as individual as all you snowflakes in this room right now, and let them die if they don't want to thrive. And then if they don't make fruit that we like, cut them down and use them to smoke bacon. Bacon that was raised in a rotational grazing system. Do nothing. Just plant the trees out in the field and let nature take its course. The ones that are awesome, you'll be able to tell because they'll be really tall and they'll have nice branches and they'll make big fruits, and when you eat them, they taste good. That's it. And that's what humans did for thousands of years before we discovered, splicing genes. Oh, let's talk about splicing genes for a second. Talk about a naive intervention. Okay, so these yahoos decide we're going to splice a gene into whatever it is, a soybean, and then spray it with herbicide. That's going to solve all the world's problems. Except the next year, pigweed says, oh, well, I have this whole genetic library back here, and I happen to have this gene card right here. Oh, and this one that happened to have that gene card can make 1 million seeds. So within 5 years, it doesn't work anymore because now that weed is glyphosate resistance. You can't win against nature, right? You keep playing the cards, and they keep going, oh, you're putting the pressure on their own critter, right? Anyway, does this make sense? Plant apple seeds, kids. Come on. All right, bees. Oh, I love bees, man. I have, my company runs what's probably going to be the largest regenerative beekeeping operation in the United States. So we basically just leave the bees alone for the most part. But I'm going to talk about the varroa mite. And you can tell all your beekeeper friends this, and if any of you are beekeeper friends, you might call me a eco-terrorist when I say this, but so varroa mites are terrible. What they do is they eat baby bees. So the mother varroa mite rides the bee into the hive and then jumps off of the bee's back, her back, and lands in the hive and finds a little tiny larva that's just developing and lays an egg or many eggs in the cell, hexagonal cell. And then that baby mite starts sucking on the goo that's inside the baby bee. Now the bees keep feeding the bee, it keeps growing, it doesn't kill it, but it weakens it. And oftentimes their wings are weak, and during the summer, that's fine, they can get by. But when they get to winter, the bees of winter physiology have a hard time heating the hive through the winter because their wings don't work, because they use their wings to vibrate the hive. So the varroa causes colony collapse in a serious way. So you can lose bees that are otherwise healthy, that have all the honey they need, they have everything they need because of varroa. It's a terrible problem, it kills bees. If your bees have varroa, it's gonna kill them, right? Except bees have been around for 100 million years, and varroa has been there too, and there's still bees, right? So if varroa was such a problem, why do bees still exist? Bees must have a solution, right? They must have an answer to varroa that doesn't involve me spraying a fog of horrible chemicals into my beehive, right? Are you curious what it is? Oh, it's so cool. And it has to do with another naive intervention, okay? So bees, and right now it's swarm season, right? Bees, when they build up their colony to a certain size, they run out of space, the queen says, I'm out of here. And she takes half the colony with her and leaves the hive. And then you might find this football-sized clump of bees like hanging on a branch, and they're looking for a new cavity to live in, okay? They leave behind half the colony of the non-flying workers and all the babies and all the honey and all the nectar and everything that they've collected, and they make a new colony. That's how bees reproduce. It's really neat. So, as the superorganism reproduce, I should say. So, when modern beekeepers keep bees, they try and prevent swarming, because that swarm is a setback, right? Because now the colony is half as big and it can't make as much honey. So when a modern beekeeper goes in and looks in their beekeeping stuff, they pull out the frames every week and they check for signs of swarming. And if they see a swarm cell, which is a queen, like that they're making a new queen to replace the old one, they smash it. Or they double up the size of the colony, they do a split on the colony, or they do something, or they mess with it in some way to prevent them from swarming, right? The swarming is bad from the modern beekeeper standpoint. But swarming is the answer to the varroa problem, because varroa mites eat what did I say? Baby bees. So when mama leaves her colony, she stops laying eggs. There's a break in the brood cycle. It's about 2 weeks long, sometimes 15 days before there's another egg laid. In that period of time, all the varroa hit their cell cycle. And so there's a break. And all the varroa die, and then the colony starts to rebuild again, and the babies are starting to be laid, and then they get reinfected, but the buildup is slow, and it's never enough to really destroy the colony, or rarely, and if it is, it's because of some other input, right? So the bees already had a solution for it. There's also some bees that are very hygienic and they'll actually see the varroa mites and pluck them off and throw them out, but that's it. So we go in, we give them sugar water, which makes their populations explode. There's tons of babies that are unprotected. The varroa blows up. And then we spray the varroa mites, which makes them stronger and the bees weaker, right? And then we prevent swarming, which is the only real answer to it, right? You see the pattern I'm going for here? Now, if I was like a really good speaker that wanted to leave you with some inspiration, I would say, this sort of thinking, like naive intervention stuff, it applies to everything. Economy, society, like, you can start looking for it. And once you start thinking this way, you'll go, oh man, that's a naive intervention, right? So look out for it. And what did I write up here? Oh yeah, what do we do with the bees? Let them swarm, for God's sake. It makes more bees. Use hives that are not thin-walled. You want ones that mimic tree hollows, right? Or just use tree hollows if you can. Don't feed them, for God's sake. You know, bees evolved to collect nectar, which we can't eat, and make it into honey, which we can. And then we get involved and we put sugar water in there. Like, why do we do that? Just let them go get it. And if they can't figure it out without sugar water, let them die. Okay. All right, and that's my son holding 3 lambs that were born 3 days ago at our farm. So yeah, that's an easy one, right? So now's your chance to ask me questions about regenerative farming and naive intervention. Go.